You are listening to Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast, where I provide a look into the remarkable experiences of the most inspiring people around Hirschsprung's disease and sport. Welcome to episode 4 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast, where I am joined by one of the founding members of the podcast, Louisa Shapton, and her dad, Andrew Shapton. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Now,
Question.
now nobody apart from us three will know this, but between us and another person called Carla, so 4 of us, we discuss the podcast regularly. We discuss various ideas about how we can grow this, get it out to more people, to know about Hirschsprung's disease. And you, Louisa, have been instrumental in pushing this forward. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we will have some more exciting news about what we're doing outside the podcast as well. And various social media aspects, Facebook groups, etc., etc. But for today, I have Andrew and Louisa Shapton, and we are going to talk about, Louisa, your story with Hirschsprung's disease, and then your dad as well to fill in the bits that are very relevant to him, and the bits obviously you don't remember because you were too young. So if we go straight from the beginning, and I'll start with you, Andrew. The first diagnosis of Hirschsprung's disease, did you know about the disease? Had you heard of Hirschsprung's disease at all before Louisa was diagnosed?
So, no, we'd not heard of it at all. And to me, it was I describe it to some people as just, it's like a bolt from the blue. You know, you have this beautiful little daughter, a bouncing baby. She's arrived. And in our case, we were shipped from one hospital 50 miles away to another hospital in the capital of Wales. And she was undergoing a bunch of tests. And we were told at 1 o'clock in the morning that she had Hirschsprung's. And again, what's that? And we were lucky enough to be seen by one of the leading consultants in the UK for Hirschsprung's, and he very kindly sat down and explained what it was in quite some detail. And to be fair, you know, we got a very good understanding of what it was, not why it was, not what had caused it, because at that point I think you were still quite shell-shocked. Both Mum and I were very, very tired. We were very bewildered. And you know, we kind of had 1, 2 o'clock in the morning because he sat down and spoke with us. It is a herpesty that we'd never heard of before and what it caused. But beyond that, we have no fit.
No idea at all. And from the just through doing the research with Hirschsprung's disease, just with the podcast, there have been plenty of studies on it. And one of the things I found out, which I thought was quite interesting, was that the 2 people that the parents of the child that have the chromosomes that make up Hirschsprung's disease, if I've explained that correctly, you have a 1 in 4 chance of having a child with Hirschsprung's disease if the mother and the father both have those chromosomes, which makes absolute sense in my case because I'm 1 of 4 and I was the unlucky one. So, do you have any brothers or sisters, Louisa?
No. So I'm the only child. So from what I understand, it was kind of, obviously because of the risk of me having it, that it was, because I had it, that it was not in my parents' best interest to have another child, which is understandable, I guess. But yeah, no, I'm still an only child and forever will be.
Fantastic. So you were triply unlucky then to get Hirschsprungs.
Very much so, yeah.
I think from our perspective as a dad, and speaking from mum as well, we wanted to give Louisa all our love and attention and care because we knew she was going to need it. And also we spoke quite some length to the medical staff, and we undertook something called genetic counselling, which is explaining the kind of things that you've explained, Tom, in terms of the risks and the probabilities or possibilities. And we felt that knowing what we knew then, it was just not right to bring another child into the world and with that risk, with that sort of Damocles hanging over us. And I think we were right to do so. Other people may not. But I think you do what you need to do within the best interest of your family.
Yeah, very much so. Each to their own on that, most definitely.
Okay.
I have two younger brothers and one older, so I'm stuck right in the middle. With the child with Hirschsprung's disease, and I guess I haven't spoken to my parents about this actually. It's probably something a podcast for them, but I guess they must have had the fear of having one child with Hirschsprung's disease, that potentially having another child with Hirschsprung's. But then there is that 25% risk, and but no, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. And obviously having a child with Hirschsprung's disease takes a lot out of you, I would imagine, as well. Sorry, go on.
It does. Beyond the endless visits back and forth hospitals, beyond the additional work that comes with handling a colostomy bag, which, we were under no illusions. It's something we were going to do. It's just an additional thing you have to care for, to bring up your child. I think sometimes there's this sort of social aspect where you've got to kind of explain to people, well, this is our bouncing baby daughter. Wasn't she lovely? Oh, hang on, she's got this thing that you need to consider, and don't cuddle her too tight because she's got a colostomy bag on. And why is that? So I think if your child has got something like diabetes or any other visible condition, for example, it's easy to explain. And there's a lot of, I think, stigma around colostomy bags and the internal plumbing that people are still a little bit wary of, still a little bit afraid of. And as I'm sure Louisa will allude to, we have no such fears in our family. We're quite open about it.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I think as well, something I touched on in the very first episode is that science has very much moved on in terms of things like stealth belts for stomas and colostomy bags and things like that have really come to the fore a lot more, and people are a lot more, maybe not so much open about it, but definitely are aware a lot more. And I think as we alluded beforehand, when a child is diagnosed with Hirschsprung's, many people have no idea what Hirschsprung's is. But again, in doing the research for this, I've found that so one in 5,000, give or take, or one per probably small town here in England have Hirschsprung's disease, which is quite common, I would think. Not common as in a diabetes or an asthma or whatever, but in terms of rare diseases, it's probably one of the more common ones, I would say.
It's odd, isn't it? And yet, you do a survey across the whole of the UK, and probably apart from those 1 in 5 and their immediate families and friends, there's probably zero knowledge. I think it's one of those things that you only know about if you know someone or are related to someone that has it, rather than asthma, diabetes, epilepsy. Everyone knows what they are. Maybe they don't understand them, but they know what they are.
Definitely heard of them. Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing as well I was going to ask was, you had to explain Hirschsprungs and the many different people, and my parents will know that experience, and I've had that experience, and Louisa, I'm sure you've had that experience where you've had to explain this, that, the other to people. Did you ever, before getting involved with a lot of the Facebook groups, and Louisa, did you know of anybody growing up that had Hirschsprungs, or was it something that you only had?
I think I knew that I wasn't the only one with that. My parents had said about how on the ward I was on in Cardiff, Heath Hospital, there was another little boy there, and he had Hirschsprungs. And I think my parents spent time talking to his parents as well. And yeah, so I knew that it wasn't a just me kind of situation. It wasn't, you hear of these cases of illnesses, and there's like 3 people in the world with it. I completely understood it wasn't that kind of situation, but it also wasn't a situation where if I said Hirschsprungs, then someone would say, "Oh, I know someone with that," or they knew what it was. It was very like, I think the first time we spoke, I started welling up because I'm 22 now, and this is the first time that I have actually knowingly had a conversation with someone who has or who has had or has Hirschsprungs. And it's taken me 22 years to find someone else. So yeah.
It took you a shorter time than it took me. It took, I was about 25 until I was teaching somebody, actually, in my career as a teacher, actually teaching somebody who has Hirschsprung. And my mum's good friends with his mum, and it took me until about 25. So you did that a lot earlier than I have.
Yeah. But yeah, it is quite unique in that sense, and it can, in honesty, it can be quite isolating and a bit confusing. I found growing up, it can feel a bit like, I don't want to put a dampener on things, but it is very, how do you explain this? And as we said, it's, I was born in 2001, so it's growing up when science maybe wasn't as developed as it was now. There was very much a taboo around, can I talk about it? Will people understand? It wasn't just a known thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Very much so. I mean, I think over the years, I don't know how it's been for the review, but over the years, I've sort of got more succinct with my answers. If anybody ever looks at my records and goes, "You have Hirschsprungs, what's that?" I tend to, beforehand, I would go into detail. I got this and that, and this happens, and this intestine gets chopped, and that and shit, whatever, and blah blah blah. But now it's more just, yeah, my stomach hurts sometimes, and then I should move on. So yeah, I tend to find. Did you find that, Andrew, through, if you had to explain Hirschsprungs to whether schools or teachers or whoever, did you find that, was it long-winded answers that you gave and tried to give loads of information, or was it sort of like right, this is it. I've got it down and succinct and go.
It was very much a long-winded answer because, and to be honest, it still is. If someone says, not that they do anymore because Louise is taking the mantle now, but I think if someone were to ask you now, what is Hirschsprung's, irrespective of if it's in the context of Louisa or not, I'd probably still give the same answer. And I'm like that because I'm keen that people understand as much as possible about it. And in the early days, it was very much context of Louisa going to school, so that she'd be able to be given a little bit of leeway or slack if she needed the loo or she didn't need the loo or whatever, so that the teachers would understand. Now, I'm more in an educational sense that people want to know what it is. Okay, I'll tell you, I will keep talking about it until you tell me to stop. So you get all the last graphic minutiae detail about this.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. And I think as we touched on before, time and science has moved on. So the explanation the condition obviously itself hasn't changed. It's still, you have your short segment and your long segment. So that hasn't changed in a sense, but I've certainly felt in sort of the 32, as I am now, 32 years I've had it, my explanation has changed. From, going very much into sort of, I've got this scar and that scar and blah, 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 blah. Has your explanation changed? I know you said you go into detail, but has it changed over the years, or is it still very much the same explanation?
I think it's very much the same explanation, and simply because I think what I'm explaining is the causes of the condition rather than the science behind it. And let me try and put that in a different way then. The causes of it are clearly genetic. Okay, so, that I think is where the science has moved on in terms of finding more information about that angle. But the impact that then has on a person who's about to be born, and they will pop into the world with this condition, that to me is still the same. Yeah, the impact of it is still the same. There's long segment, there's short segment, there's the pull-throughs, there's the reversals, there's the scar tissue. Well, that's all the same, I think, because science won't change that until science comes up with a bunch of procedures that change. It's the, as you say, Tom, the research that's changed and the knowledge has changed. But until the procedures change, the impact is still the same, and that's what I tried to impart in people.
Yeah, for sure. And another part that I wanted to talk about, because Louisa, obviously we've talked before, and we talked through the WhatsApp group and what have you. And you talked about dancing being very, very important to you. When did you start dancing?
Yeah, so I started dance. I think I was about 3 or 4. And I started with ballet, and then I went on to tap dance. And then at maybe 10, I went on to jazz, and I did a few other things. And yeah, I think for up until maybe my mid-teens, I was doing dance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, and how did, because with Hirschsprung's never stopped you from dancing, as far as I'm aware with what you told me. And one of the key parts from why I wanted to start this podcast is to give people that, not hope as such, but to tell people actually you can go and do what you want to do, whether it be sports or whether it be arts, whether it be whatever, construction, whatever it might be. But obviously it does come with, the occasional challenges. But from what you told me in the past, dancing never, you never stopped dancing. It never, Hirschsprung's never ever stopped you doing whatever you wanted to do. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from that perspective, it was, yes, I faced additional challenges because my stomach muscles weren't as strong as everyone else's. And it wasn't until after I left dance that I realised, well, it's because I've had multiple surgeries on my stomach. But apart from that, I would turn up to dance 3-4 times a week. I did exams, I passed, I made so many friends. It didn't stop me, and I almost don't consider myself to have had Hirschsprungs. Like, even now, unless when I go into hospital, unless it's, stomach related, and they say, like, any other medical conditions I should know about, I, rightly or wrongly, I don't say Hirschsprungs because I often forget. And I say that in a positive sense, that it hasn't held me back. It doesn't, I'm fortunate enough that it doesn't impact my day-to-day life. And if it does, that I've navigated around it, I've embraced it, and it's not detrimental to my lifestyle at all. And I am very grateful for that, and for the medical staff and everyone who supported me to that point, and Mr. Simon Haddad in Cardiff, who I think he's retired now. But it was, well, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. So but yeah, absolutely. Like, I completely appreciate that. At the time, it must have been so frightening for my family. But there is, to all the parents out there is no reason that your child can't go on to succeed and be on a podcast about Hirschsprungs. It's not a be-all, end-all situation.
That's really interesting. You mentioned, and absolutely, you're absolutely right with that as well. You can achieve, what you want to achieve. I know it sounds a bit cliche, but
Yeah.
you definitely can. It shouldn't ever hold you back. Well, it's interesting you said about almost forgetting that you have Hirschsprung when they say if you have any other medical condition. Again, if you really think like me in my condition, you have a folder that's about 300 pages long and it has everything in the world in it. And it's just a quick, because when I went to hospital, I went to Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, and I could always tell when I was next because they would wheel the trolleys through with all of the folders, and mine was always the biggest. So I always knew when I was next. But I imagine, Andrew, as well, you probably had to, as you touched on before, you had to sort of explain various conditions, but it never stopped Louisa doing anything growing up at all?
No, I think quite the reverse. I think what struck me is how Louisa was. I think, again, to use a cliche, you always think your child is the best in the world, and yeah, Louisa is. But I think we were in hospital for one of her checkups, and she was asked to sort of, she must have been about 6 or 7, and she was asked to sort of hoist herself up onto the hospital bed, and she did so, and there was a big clunk on the bed, and the Mr. Haddad, the surgeon who saved her life, looked at her and said, "Do you mind if I get one of my colleagues to come and look at her. But no, not at all. Apparently, if you have Hirschsprungs, you have a very slim chance of becoming quite beefy and, meaty. And what he said was a lot of very young kids with Hirschsprungs tend to be somewhat, because they've got issues obviously with it, with ingesting and digesting proteins and goodness from food because of the short length of the bowel, etc. They have the potential for not to be as beefy and meaty as other kids, and yet yours, Louisa, we're bucking the trend. So that struck me as, well, if she's bucking the trend, then she can do whatever she wants. She can be whatever she wants. She can go wherever she wants. So it's never stopped her. I think it's made her subconsciously more of a fighter than held her back.
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I pick up on that point of being a fighter as well, and I've noticed this with myself and with others that I've spoken to, that partially because of the amount of surgeries that you do have with Hirschsprungs, because it's not, for anybody who's, I'm sure it's not just one and done, you do have quite a few surgeries. I mean, I'm in double figures now, so I have quite a few. And there are many people who've had a lot more than me and are a lot younger than me. But you do build this resilience. I didn't sort of have a very high pain threshold. I mean, it takes an awful lot for anything to really cause me any pain, but I attribute that to my Hirschsprungs. Is that similar to you, Louisa?
Sorry. I think in terms of a high pain threshold, I don't know anything different, so I couldn't necessarily say yes or no. But I know from a mentality perspective, I definitely, when I do need to call on that, I need to be mentally strong. I kind of do remember that from birth, I've gone through these surgeries. I've fought Hirschsprungs. It's, I don't want to say invincible, but it does keep me going. So I think for me, it's more of a mental standpoint rather than a physical standpoint, but that's only because I don't know anything different. So yeah.
That's interesting, because because Hirschsprung's is from birth, isn't it? So it will be, anybody with Hirschsprung's won't know any different. They won't, I don't know a life without Hirschsprung's, and I don't know anybody else who has Hirschsprung's who does know a life without Hirschsprung's. I mean, I was diagnosed 3 weeks after birth, something like that. Most are diagnosed within a few hours of birth, or a few days after. When were you diagnosed?
So I mean, this is probably a question for my dad.
Yeah, I was thinking I should knock it about Andrew that one.
Yeah, so Louisa was 2 days. So Louisa was born on a Monday, and by Wednesday evening, so she was born lunchtime on a Monday. By Wednesday evening, we were in Cardiff, and 1:00 Thursday morning. So what's that? 2.5 days. We were told she had Hirschsprung's. So it wasn't an immediate diagnosis. It was within the sort of standard couple of days that people will normally say, yeah, if you've got Hirschsprung's, a couple of days you exhibit the sort of possibly distended tummy or whatever, and then they start to give you tests. So yeah, that's Louisa's time frame.
Yeah, it sounds like a fairly, not that Hirschsprung's is normal, but a fairly normal way of being diagnosed with Hirschsprung. But it is usually within the first sort of few days to a week that you tend to be people tend to spot the signs, and then you diagnosed fairly shortly after that. But I wanted to move on to sort of now and what you're doing now, and how Hirschsprungs has potentially helped you in your studies, or whether it has helped you at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently on a gap year from Cardiff Metropolitan University. But I am studying sport conditioning, rehabilitation and massage, which is a fancy name for sports therapy. And I do really enjoy the course. It's wonderful. And I think I'm not 100% sure on my end goal at the moment, but since a young age, I've said I want to go into Hirschsprungs in some way or another. At one point, I wanted to be a Hirschsprungs researcher. Another point, I said I wanted to be a pediatrician specialising in Hirschsprungs. And whilst that hasn't quite materialised yet, I think I'm at a point that I definitely want to go into Hirschsprung's research. And that may not be in a lab. It might be looking to work with children, adults, Hirschsprung's patients who have some sort of colostomy, ostomy, and helping them through the rehabilitation process of that. That's something that I do feel quite strongly about, that I didn't have as far as I'm aware. And so, as I said earlier, in dance, my stomach muscles were awful. And so just kind of working with the Hirschsprung's community, whether it be on a professional level or in like a voluntary sense on the side type thing. But just to help in any way I can and use the skills and knowledge I'm learning in university to kind of give back to the community. Because I think in this day and age with social media, we can reach out to each other and realise we're not on our own, and that there is stuff that can be done that isn't necessarily surgical. And I'm not suggesting that you don't need to have surgery. But as well as the surgery, there's pain management, there's aftercare, there's things that we can do to kind of what's the word, like, to really help Hirschsprung's patients, survivors, warriors, whatever you want to say, to just, I feel better is an understatement, but
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
to deal with the Hirschsprungs, because it's not, as you said, it's not a one surgery and you're done. For a lot of people, there is complications, surgery after surgery after surgery, and you're not really getting anywhere. And so I think it has influenced how, coming back to your question, sorry, I think it has influenced what I want to do, because, as I said, as much as I love sports therapy, it's not working with the population that I do want to work with, which is the Hirschsprung's community.
it's interesting. I mean, I've touched on the point you said earlier about stomach muscles, and that was something you taught me when we first had our conversation. That makes total sense now, but I never understood it as a child or a young adult. That, of course, my stomach muscles would be rubbish because I haven't got any. I have very few. So I never really understood that And that was, this may have clicked with everybody else much sooner than me, and it might just be me being very thick. But yeah, it just didn't click with me until you said it, and it's it reminds me of something I did in the summer. I ran a race in London, or was it summer? No, a few months ago. And one of my friends commented on my running style and said that I lean over too much because I haven't got any stomach muscles to hold me up. But it things like that, because people don't know that you have the condition, because you don't, it's not visible. People can't necessarily see that it's not necessarily your fault, or it's possibly a bit trickier than others to, for example, hold planks or to be able to lift things or whatever it might be, just because the stomach muscles aren't there. But yes, no, thank you very much, because you taught me that. So thank you. But yes, you're right. And that kind of neatly ties us on to the next thing, when you were talking about helping and community and trying to have a community out there, because I think, as you sort of touched on, we didn't know anybody else growing up who had this condition. Certainly I nobody had necessarily heard of it. And if we could have, I know there are communities out there who do bits and pieces for Hirschsprungs, and they do phenomenal jobs, whether it be on Facebook or whether it be charities. They do some phenomenal work, but to have more awareness out there, I think is really important. And I'd sort of come back to your point, Andrew, about when Louise is diagnosed with Hirschsprung's disease, how much support, and not necessarily from sort of the hospital, but sort of things you could search or research or anything like that, was there around Hirschsprung's?
So I think we've got to consider time frames, I guess. I'm not necessarily saying this is Google, but Google was very much, on the internet in 2001, was very much in its early adoption stage. I work in technology and have done for all my working life. So I guess I was an incredibly early adopter of the internet. So, the internet was something that it was an early research tool, that there wasn't a lot out there in those days about Hirschsprung's. This is almost, well, it was pre-Wikipedia, for example. And, Wikipedia is the font of all knowledge, right? Except where it isn't. So what we had was all the hospital could supply us. Here's one or two these things called, what can they call them? Websites. Yeah. Because this was 22 years. And the aftercare and the support that we had, we had great medical staff who would answer all the questions we had for them. We had a stomach care nurse that came to our home every couple of weeks to make sure we had the right type of supplies, because as Louisa was growing, her colostomy bags would change in size, and he'd get the larger one up as she got older. And we'd have the care from the medical staff at the hospitals. But aside from that, there was pretty much nothing. And that's not to say that the medical staff and the people that did support us weren't good enough. They were absolutely the best that they could be. We asked for up to date. But I guess it's a sign of the times that in those days, there wasn't any goal to get the materials that perhaps helped up. Where now, we have the internet. And I think that even though science, as we said quite early on this evening, Todd, science has moved on, but the support materials that I think are out there possibly haven't kept up with that. You know, things like Louisa was mentioning about her stomach muscles. Where does it say that, you know, if you have a child that's diagnosed, one of the things you might encourage them to do is gymnastics, for example, to get those stomach muscles in trim for later during the thing. And no doubt there were other things that we could have done to help Louisa had we known about it.
That's an interesting point that you make, that actually going and doing sports or activities that would strengthen stomach muscles is probably is something that is really, really important, because I think certainly when I was growing up, it was almost the advice was the opposite, that actually, you know, avoid doing too much with your stomach muscles because they're a bit weaker and et cetera, but actually I think going the other way around, so long as you're sensible with it. And again, this isn't a podcast of medical advice. I'll just make that clear. I am not the doctor in any way, shape or form. But actually doing, gymnastics, doing, we're not saying, you know, go crazy, but doing things that would help strengthen stomach muscles are really, really important, as they are for everybody, but especially with somebody who has those stomach muscles lacking. Did you find that your stomach muscles improved when you did gymnastics? But that would be probably the answer would just be a straight yeah, I imagine.
I don't know. I did do gymnastics for a few years, and I don't think it was really my thing. But kind of comparing it to dance, where again, especially ballet, where stomach muscles are needed continuously to maintain that posture. Evidently not. From when I started over to, you know, mid-teens, when I said this isn't really for me anymore, and that wasn't because of my lack of stomach muscles. It was they just never seemed to change, and again, it's maybe I hadn't clicked that most of my stomach is scar tissue. So I can't just pull my belly in and suck my stomach in like all the other girls around me were. You know, it's not quite the same. And so even just educating ourselves and parents, families, people going through this, that the right type of exercises, and it doesn't need to be planks, it doesn't need to be sit-ups and all those horrible core exercises. It doesn't need to be that at all. But just kind of from a personal standpoint, it was a light bulb moment, and it sounds like I've passed on that light bulb to you.
Sure.
Was that you know, our stomachs aren't like everyone else's, and quite a lot of us have had fairly large portions of, if not all of our intestines removed, and so even our stomach muscles aren't necessarily going to sit correctly, so, and they need to adapt to that as well. But yeah,
I think taking it beyond that, though, in terms of aftercare and support, a lot of the support that we had back then was purely medical, whereas, you know, we didn't have. I want to use the term counselling, but that maybe isn't right. You know, we didn't have the support that says, well, okay, now you have a child with Hirschsprung, this is what it is, this is what you need to do. this is how you can help your child in the best way that you can. It was very much about, let's sort out the plumbing. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much the sort of practical, the things you can see, as opposed to, and I think you make a really, really interesting point, and I think that's something. Again, I'm going back, 20, 30 years ago. Something that wasn't talked about was mental health at all, and something that's a lot more prevalent now, and something that I think is really, really important when it does come to Hirschsprungs, especially. Again, in doing the research for it, there are a lot of conditions linked to Hirschsprung. So people have Hirschsprungs and another condition. But none of that was talked about. It was just, you have Hirschsprungs. But the world was, as we said, the world was a completely different place. I think, as you said, people just look at the internal stuff, right, this goes here and this isn't working and this is missing and yada, yada, yada. And I think talking about everything else that kind of goes along with having Hirschsprung's or another long-term health condition. As I said, it has very much been linked to Crohn's, and for obvious reasons, and very much linked to autism. In the research that I've done, and not a lot is made of that. There've been several people who've contacted me who said, my son, daughter, whoever has Hirschsprung's, and they have this other condition as well. And we didn't know at the time. So yes, I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah. I think for me, as I kind of said earlier, it's not just the medical side, it's where, as a person, even at that young age, ourselves, the person with Hirschsprung's, and the families and caregivers, we are whole-rounded people. It's not just a 2G, sort the Hirschsprung's and you're good for life. It's, as you say, the long-term and short-term medical conditions that go with it. It's the mental health, it's the practical health, it's the peer support that's needed. It's the, how do I tell someone my child or I have Hirschsprung's? I think, even like, how do you tell a partner you've got it? That's, that's something that's not ever an easy conversation. But yeah, it's almost making it an encompassed, not just 2D Hirschsprung's label, job done. There's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, that absolutely. And so touching on my final point, really, I'll come to you, Andrew. I've had plenty of conversations with people and messages from people who said, my son, my daughter's just been diagnosed with Hirschsprung's disease, or was diagnosed a few months ago. What would you say to somebody who was concerned or worried that their child's just been diagnosed with Hirschsprung's as a parent of a child with Hirschsprung?
I think my first message would be, don't be scared. It is a serious condition. There's no getting away from that. It is long-term. It is life-threatening. But please, please, please don't be scared, because there are ways through this, and you will end up with son or daughter you always dreamed of. That's my first message. We have. And if we can do it, anyone can do it.
And touching on that point, because obviously this podcast is about inspirational people and people I really want to get to interview. I'm sorry about this, Louisa, but how proud of you are you of Louisa and how far she's come from her Hirschsprung's condition?
at this point, words would fail me. She's had a tough life almost from day one, and she continues to astound me daily with what she does, and I think especially the passion in which she takes things on. She will take cause, and she will fight tough and nail for it. And I, it's the old cliche. Would I change her? Absolutely not. Would I want Louisa not to have Hirschsprungs in a crazy, odd, fatty sort of way? No, because I think it's made her what she is. Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of her every day.
For sure. And lastly, Louisa, I know we sort of said a little bit about your sports therapy and all the great stuff you're doing on your gap year and what you want to achieve with that. But what would ideally the future hold for you personally?
For me personally, I think. Oh, that's a really good question.
Sorry, I left it till last.
On a personal level, I want what everyone wants, I guess, or most people want. I want to travel, see the world, a good job that I enjoy, a house, a family. Yeah, I just want a normal life, I guess, if that's a sensible answer.
Please, yeah.
Yeah.
As normal as we can get with Hirschsprungs. As normal as we can get.
Yeah, as normal as we can get.
Fantastic. Well, on behalf of me and the podcast, I'd like to say thank you very much, both of you, for joining me for episode 4 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. We will be back with another episode next week, so thank you very much. We'll be back with episode 5. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Find us on Instagram at Toms_Hirschsprungs_podcast. Listen to previous episodes on Spotify by searching Tom's Hirschsprungs podcast.